welcome back to this Return to Wellbeing series. My name is Taylor Staines from the Active Harbour team at Harbour District Council. I'm here with co-presenters Usain Khan and Jake Bertoni from the South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership.
Hi, I am Jake and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Officer at the Learning South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership. The Return to Wellbeing podcast series will focus on supporting children's mental health needs as lockdown is gradually lifted and they return back to school. In today's episode, we'll be talking about depression.
Hi, I am Hussein and I am the Development Manager at the Learning South Leicestershire School Sports Partnership. I would like to welcome our very special guest, Aggie, who is a mental health facilitator and counsellor at Corby Mind. So, Aggie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a psychologist and psychotherapist. And like you said, I'm a mental health facilitator over at the Medical Centre in Market Harbour. But I also do one-to-one counselling and facilitate groups at Corby Mind.
That's great. So can you tell us a little bit about what depression is?
Yeah, of course. So I think it's important to know that we all feel low or down at times, and that's absolutely normal. But if your negative emotions, if those thoughts last a long time or feel very severe, you may have depression. So what a depression is really, it's a mood disorder where you feel very down all the time. It can happen as a reaction to something like abuse, bullying, family breakdown, but it can also run in families. And also when I say a long time, general consensus is that it's a few weeks or longer. And it is one of the most common types of mental illness. So I think it's important to talk about it, reduce that stigma and make it an open conversation for everyone. So, and I know although it's hard to feel optimistic when you are depressed, there's a lot of support available to help you feel better. So yeah, that's the sort of overall on depression really. So it's that sort of low mood, not wanting to do anything that lasts a long time and feel very severe.
Great stuff. Thank you, Aggie. So what are the main symptoms of depression? What would you look to see if someone had depression?
Yeah, so depression affects different people in different ways. The sort of 2-week period represents a change in functioning for the teen. In addition to experiencing depressed or irritable mood or loss of interest or pleasure, there are other symptoms that must be present. So those include anger, hostility, changes in eating or sleeping habits, fatigue or lack of energy, feeling of guilt, worthlessness, hopelessness, this difficulty concentrating, tearfulness or frequent crying, agitation, unexplained aches or pains. I think a lot of people sometimes underestimate how mental health can actually affect our physical health as well. There's those sort of, thoughts of death or suicide or self-harm and not wanting to do things that you previously enjoyed and avoiding friends, social situations. So isolating yourself, feeling irritable, upset, miserable, lonely. And, just because you experience one or more of those symptoms as well, it doesn't mean you're definitely affected by depression. I think those are the emotions and feelings that we will experience at some point through different situations in our lives. But I think, if a lot of those happen in a short period of time, then it's important to talk to your GP, talk to your friends, your family, get that full diagnosis as well from a doctor. And also the very important thing is that the possibility of suicide exists at all times during a major depressive episode. So it's watching for some signs of suicidal ideation among teens as well. So, sort of looking at your own feelings and emotions, but also from parent perspective, from friends perspective, it's, there's sort of signs including talking about committing suicide, writing poems, stories, reference death or the end, engaging in reckless behaviors. A lot of the time, patient might not have that active suicidal ideation, but find that there is more going on. And, sort of always saying goodbye to friends and family members, whether it's in person, in notes. So there is a lot of symptoms of depression. I think they all vary from a person to person. I wish I could tell you that it's very general, very sort of that applies to everyone. However, people will have different experiences, different feelings, different emotions. And like I said, those symptoms of depression, I think we'll all experience them at some point. But I think when it's a build up, when it's ongoing, then that's important to have a look at. And whether, like I said, the first steps is to talk to friends or family, but also actually seeing a GP, having that full diagnosis, because there might be something different going on. If you're constantly tired or don't have that motivation, we might be talking, there's something to do with physical aspects, with vitamin D deficiency. So let's not jump into conclusions, but let's have that open conversation with family and with professionals and see where we are.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. One of the questions I wanted to ask Aggie is, how can you help your friend or your family member if you think they possibly do have depression?
Yeah, so I think it's very important, like I said, sort of looking at those suicidal ideations, those ideas, that is important if a friend talks to you about it. And sometimes it's great because we do have friendships where we talk about those things, and it's important that sometimes we might not see the help that is available, but actually another person just talking to them, opening up is important. And I think for friends and for family as well, there's different ways of treating depression, but sort of on a day-to-day basis, so to speak, with friends, with family, I think it's important to have that support and sort of focus on listening and making that one-to-one time priority. So actually, we can't fix anything for anyone, but in the sort of lectures won't help and sort of make the depression go away, or if we, especially now with the COVID, with everything that is going on, the mental health will be there, the anxiety, the depression will be heightened. And I think I should just that active, empathic listening, rather, a lot of people say that we're in the same boat, and it's great to normalize that. But at the same time, let's not take away from the feelings that someone is experiencing. So I think the number one is focusing on listening, so confronting that social isolation. And if your friend hasn't spoke to you in a week, just drop them a message, see how they are, and just provide that support and just that open conversation.
That's really good, yeah. So what can people do to treat depression, or maybe what can they do if they think they've got depression? Who do they go to talk to get a diagnosis?
Yeah, so it's important to take that first step. Depression can affect anyone, and you deserve help to feel better. So talk to someone you like and trust, and that could be a teacher, relative, counselor, friend, but also give yourself time. We're only humans, and especially now with COVID, our mental health will be affected. And we see that already. And you may need to grieve. Utilize that support network. Ask friends, family, school, there's school counselors, there's friends who are more than willing to talk to you and support you. And take time for yourself. Listen to your needs, listen to what you need. Have that self-care and talk it over bit by bit. Let yourself think about the trauma and talk about it with others. I feel like I'm just banging on about talking to others, but it's very important not to isolate yourself and sit with those problems, because sometimes they will grow and they will become more and more overwhelming. So get into routine, even if you don't feel much like eating, for example. Try to have regular meals, wake up early, have a schedule, make self-care part of that routine. So whether it's hobbies, whether it's writing, whether it's music, and physical exercise as well. That's something that releases endorphins. That's something that is important to have in your schedule as well. And like I said, your feelings and thoughts may be very intense and should gradually, over time, reduce, although they might not totally disappear. But if your feelings or thoughts continue to cause you difficulties after, I would say, approximately 1 month after the event, after something that perhaps triggered it, you may want to consider further support. So actually, again, talking to family, talking to teachers, always seek advice of your GP, because like I said, there's so many different symptoms and there's things that could be actually physical rather than mental, yet affect that. They may offer to refer you to the child and adult and mental health services, so CAMHS, an expert or psychiatrist who can help you. There is also early intervention service available, education and psychology service, Leicestershire County Council, where parents and carers can actually speak to educational psychologists. So I think, there's a lot of steps that we can take ourselves and put things in place to see if our mental health, our depression, low mood, whatever it is that we're experiencing is improving. But really it's taking that first step. Let's not sort of wait and watch what happens. But once we start to realize something's going on, let's seek that support. And like I said, the sort of next step after you've spoken with a friend or family or school is to seek that support from the GP, because they're the ones who can put the most support in place.
Lovely, fantastic. So you've talked about talking to friends and family and GPs and a few others. Where would you recommend you would go to get help from?
Yeah, so apart from sort of family, friends, I understand that we're not all the same. Sometimes we don't have families that are open, that talk about mental health. They don't feel comfortable. There's different environments, and I think that's important to remember as well. If you've got that family, if you've got that open dialogue, then that's great. Same with friends. But if that's something that we don't have, then again, you can go to the GP, you can have that confidential advice. If not, there's so many different organizations, so many different services and helplines. And, that's where they sort of going through Childline, Young Minds. I think, a lot of the time, because I know there's so much going on, there's so many services that promote that mental health. I think it's looking at what is available. So even going on a website to just Health for Teens, that gives you so many different resources, so many different things. Like I say, whether it's having those Young Minds Crisis Messenger, actually having someone there, and I know a lot of the time actually having that impartial person is good to explore what's going on, to have that fresh eye looking at it. And like I say, the Childline, CALM, Samaritans, there's so many different avenues, and I think sometimes we forget about that, especially when we feel low. We sort of think we are alone, but I promise you that if you even go, like I said, on that one website, there's going to be so many resources, so many different services that you can access.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you for that information. So what are the risk factors or triggers for teenage depression?
Yeah, so the triggers is sort of, as I mentioned earlier, it's that sort of bullying, whether it's sort of relationship or breakdown, going through sort of, abuse, whether it's physical, mental, sexual abuse, and having that sort of, stress as well, increased stress in regards to school, exams, especially now with COVID and that isolation, that stress of what's actually going on with my school, with my qualifications, what's happening. It's so much out of control that, that can be a trigger as well, not only for anxiety and stress, but also for depression. And I think as well with COVID, what comes with that is that lack of routine. We're not getting up at certain time, going to school, going to work. Those days can be very blurred. And there's already research showing that, in certain places in the world because of COVID, because of that lack of routine and kids being out of school. That depression rate, them not wanting to leave their room, have a shower, see their friends, it is increasing. And like I said, it is normal to experience that. Just validate our own feelings as well. And again, social media, one side of it is great because we get that support. We get that contact with people, especially now through the lockdown. But I think the other side of it is that it can cause depression. There's that, whether it's bullying, whether it's that mental abuse going on, and also of course drugs and alcohol that can cause a depression. A lot of teenagers, adults see that sort of, whether it is drugs and alcohol that relieve those symptoms at the beginning. When you come down, when you sober up, it's when it hits you. So I think that those are the sort of risk factors, those are the triggers for depression.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Aggie. And I think, we're talking about normalizing mental health, and I think it's important for people listening to this podcast to really not be embarrassed if you feel those symptoms, because there's so many people going through the same thing, specifically through the lockdown period as well as you, and I don't think you should be embarrassed and have that stigma attached. And it's really important to talk and be open and speak to someone about that if you do feel like depression is your problem. We've had some student submissions from the Robert Smythe Academy, and they've asked us to ask you some questions. Our first student question is, what support will students get if they have lost a family member or a friend during the pandemic, or what support is available?
Yeah, and I think that's very important. We see that grief, that bereavement, those increased rates because of the pandemic. And I think part of it that links to depression is actually looking at stages of grief and normalizing that, because we will go through that, and that's a normal process. That's for our brain, for our body to actually process what happened, because it is such a big shock. So I think and one of the stages of grief is depression, is that sort of, no motivation, feeling low, and there's so many different emotions that you will go through. And again, I think it's important to make sure that, actually what you are experiencing is normal. If you're in denial, if you don't want to accept that, that's okay. That's the first stage. We need to go through that. Then go through the anger, go through that depression, and before we even get into that sort of acceptance. And I think, that's important. But with the support, we always say, and by we, I mean psychologists, psychotherapists, when you work in mental health, is that through those early stages, what is important is that you've got that support network. You've got that support around you. And with the lockdown, that is limited, of course. But, there's still WhatsApp, there's still telephone, there's still different ways you can actually communicate with each other. So have that around you, and also focus on self-care, whether it's going for a walk, whether you're more of a creative person and you're into art and painting and drawing, or listening to music or playing an instrument, whatever it is, it's important to have that. And then, as you progress through those stages, and it's not very simple process, and it can be overwhelming, and there is a lot of emotions going on. But also look what's available at your school or your college. Are there counseling services? If there isn't, then perhaps it's the sort of GP support that you need. So you can access that talking therapy, you can access that counseling. It allows you to talk about it, to process it. And there are other organizations as well, if you don't sort of want to go and see your GP, or if you don't want to talk to your school. There's organizations such as Hope Again, which is part of CRUISE, which is bereavement counseling. So the CRUISE is more around adults. When they go through the loss, when they go through the bereavement, that's something they can access. But for the teenagers, for younger people, that's Hope Again, which is part of CRUISE. And they also have online resources for young people where you can get involved. You can actually talk with other people who has lost family members, friends. So, you know, it opens that dialogue, it opens that support, and allows you to talk with others who are in that similar situation. So that's the, you know, that's the sort of support that you will get.
Brilliant. Some really useful information for support for all, I would say. We have another student submission from Robert Smythe Academy, and this one says, what can I do to help myself when I feel down and can't be bothered to do anything?
Yeah, and that's something that we hear so much, because depression is such a vicious cycle, and that motivation is gone. And the fact that, you know, we don't want to get up, we don't want to be proactive, and it can feel very counterproductive, it can feel very overwhelming, because we are in that cycle. And I think, you know, I think what is important is to talk, do different things, try different things, whether it's, again, exercising, self-care, and that sort of idea that we think about thinking. So we see what's going on. Is there anything that causes us the low mood? You know, I always say, if you start noticing that something doesn't sit right, start writing things down. Start seeing what's going on, what's the sort of thinking processes. And I know it's easy for me to say, because I've studied that for a good 2 years and I've worked with it. So it's easier for me to, you know, look at it from a perspective of a professional and someone who isn't in that cycle where, like I said, sometimes you just don't want to do anything, you feel down, and that is absolutely normal. And I say, you know, whether it's coming to see your GP, whether it's talking to someone, they might have some great ideas, like I say, whether it's exercising, whether it's play music, being creative, whatever it is. But I think the most important thing as well is that all of that is great, but let's be realistic. Let's set those SMART goals, something that we can achieve. Because let's say you're a person, not even thinking about depression, but let's say you're a person who's haven't exercised at all. And then, you know, we've got that goal because of social media, because of peer pressure, whatever it is, that, you know, we need to exercise now. We need to spend an hour a day, 6 days a week. I mean, that's setting yourself a little bit for failure there, because it's not something that we used to. It's not something that we can actually sustain. And I say it's the same with mental health. Set yourself, I don't know, half an hour once a week for exercise, 15 minutes for going on a app that helps you with mental health. Put that little schedule here and there, and try and see how you get on, because those little things, I say, those little things will help. They might not feel like you want to do them, but I promise you, once you went for a run or had a session of yoga, whatever it is that floats your boat, I promise you, you will feel better. Those happy hormones, those endorphins will be released. And I always say, what's better? Feel low and depressed 24/7, or even have that 1 hour of that break when you actually feel good. It's sort of thinking about, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then setting yourself those goals, having that schedule, and be realistic. Because like I say, you know, you don't want to be overwhelming yourself with something that isn't part of your routine, that isn't something that is a norm to you. So I think, you know, I think that's what you can do to help yourself. But also, like I say, sometimes you don't want to do that, and actually just offloading to a friend, or, you know, different services, whether it's Kooth that provides counseling, whether it's just that, and you actually can get rid of some of those emotions and some of those feelings, and you don't internalize them. I think, you know, I think that's what you can do to help yourself. And I feel sometimes it might feel very counterproductive. And like I said, you know, it's easy for me to say the things that we should be doing, but I promise you, even if it's 15 minutes once a week, you can build on that and create your routine that helps with your mental health and improves your mood and your feelings and your thoughts.
Brilliant, some great advice there. So the final student question is, what is the difference between depression and feeling down sometimes?
Yeah, I think, like I say, feeling down is okay. There's going to be things that will make us feel down that, like I say, whether it's a relationship breakdown, I expect a person to feel sad about it, to feel low about it, and that's absolutely normal feeling. But when that becomes severe, when you don't want to get out of bed, when you think that actually I don't care if I wake up, that's when it becomes different. There's different feelings. We're going to go through happy feelings. We're going to go through sad feelings. I promise you, I haven't met a person yet who would be happy their entire life 24/7. And I think we sometimes need those bad emotions to appreciate the good emotions. So I think, having a low mood, that's something that you experience for few days, few weeks. It won't stop you from day-to-day activities, doing things, from having that motivation, having those goals in life that you want to achieve. When you slip into that, like I said, not wanting to get out of bed, isolating yourself, falling in that routine, not having really purpose, not having an aim, and those low emotions, low mood actually persist, and it gets really severe to a point where, like I say, you might feel suicidal, you might feel like you want to harm. That's when it becomes a depression, and that's when you need to seek that help. Like I said, let's not take the approach of wait and see what happens. If that happens, even if it's just a low mood, just have a chat with someone. If you had a chat with someone and that makes you feel better, and you feel actually I've been heard, I can manage now, then that's great. But if you had that chat and you feel actually something still doesn't sit right with me, then that's the point where you need to seek that further help. And sometimes it's not about diagnosis. Sometimes it's not about being diagnosed with major depressive episode or with anxiety or with bipolar, whatever it is. It's just about having that support that you need when you're going through whatever it is that you're going through.
That's great. Thank you for talking to us today, Aggie, and thank you for listening to this episode in this podcast series. If you have any questions about anything we've discussed today, please comment below.